Unsurprisingly, our little Mini Cooper has some more issues. This is one of the things that was revealed on the MOT, which is that the tie rod end, specifically the inner tie rod, is basically worn out and needs replacing. Replacing the whole tie rod assembly actually isn't that difficult. There is one or technically two special tools that you'll need, but they're not all that expensive, and I'll go through them in this video. The first job is obviously to safely jack up the car, and then to remove the main ball joint nut. I would highly recommend using an impact wrench for this, especially if it's as crusty as ours is. And then you'll also need to remove the two clamps that hold the dust boot on, and then remove the tie rod or the inner tie rod end massive nut itself. Now, these clips can be a little hard to get to. You will basically want to push a flathead screwdriver into that little gap and then sort of twist them out. That will break them loose. But you can make things easier for yourself by turning the steering wheel all the way to the opposite side to where you're going. So in this case, that was to the right. You'll also probably want to spray your favorite penetrant fluid all over all of the rusty fasteners. And then, like I said, use an impact to get this nut off if you can. You can get away with hand tools with this if you don't have access to an impact, but would highly recommend if you can. I ended up having to use a full ball joint splitter for this, as my standard tie rod end splitter wouldn't fit over the gap. I did also have to hammer it into place, but it didn't take that much force to pop it loose. It's a relatively small ball joint. But one of the interesting things I noticed was that the ball joint itself wasn't in that bad condition. The inner ball joint, though, as you can see by just how loose this is and how easily it moves around, is on the more worn side. You can feel it slightly while driving. There's just a little bit of a notchiness and a dead zone while steering from one direction to another. Where you can see here that the ball joint is relatively stiff. It's in pretty good nick. The dust boot wasn't damaged at all until I came along. But the entire tie rod itself is easily turned and is literally just flopping around with it out of the ball joint. So it's definitely time to get this one replaced. Once you have the rear clip off, you can pull the dust boot off and you'll see both the inner tie rod ball joint and the whole nut assembly that you need to remove. This is a massive nut, and I highly recommend you pick up one of these tools. This is a inner tie rod end tool. You can get a couple of different designs as well. I picked this one because it meant that I didn't have to remove the outer tie rod to get it on. You just remove these two nuts and washers and then slip the sort of U-bolt over. Use a 3/8 drive ratchet, although in my case I used an adapter to 1/2 inch so that I get the torque necessary, because oh boy, it's tight. But then once it's loose, you can just unthread it. In my case, it was running into the control arm, so I had to remove that tool before being able to remove the ball joint itself. But then you just unwind the whole tie rod end assembly, and it's nice and easy. With the tie rod end out, you can see both the whole assembly and the threads that you'll need to thread into. I'm using a new dust boot, even though the one that's still on the old one is technically fine, but I thought it's a few quid extra, so why not? And this is the part number for the full assembly or rod assembly that I'm replacing this with. You want to put the new dust boot on first and the clamp to hold it in place, and then you can thread the tie rod end onto the inner tie rod. I tried to match up the lengths of this, the old to the new, so that I had a rough, sort of, obviously not perfect alignment, but it was close enough to then, safely get us to, in my case, Kwik Fit just down the road, to have a proper alignment. You will obviously want to use the tie rod, or the inner tie rod end tool, to tighten the tie rod end fully. This is a very important step. You cannot forget this, and you want to have this as tight as it came off, so that this doesn't, unthread itself during use. Weirdly, one of the hardest things for me to do on this was just put the new dust boot on onto the steering rack. I don't know why it took me so long. I think it took me longer than the majority of the rest of the the operation, but yeah, I finally managed to squeeze it on and get a clamp installed. I know that this isn't the correct type of clamp. I'm using a standard Jubilee clip, but Since this isn't a rotating element, I don't really care about the balance, and this is way easier than trying to put one of the other clamps that I don't have the proper tool for, so we'll leave it there. Also, the new nut is a nylock nut, a locking nut, so you basically just need to run it down until it's home, and I'm using the impact for this, especially because this is a ball joint, and so you don't want the ball joint to be spinning as it's being tightened, and generally impacts don't do that, so that's all good. Once you have that back installed, you can then obviously get the wheel back on, get the wheel bolts torqued to spec. In my case, it's about 120 Newton meters, and then you should definitely head to an alignment shop. We were considerably out on this, despite the fact that, like I said, I tried to match the two lengths as best as I could, but yeah, it was still quite a few turns off, and so I'm happy to say that it's all been aligned, it's all nice and sorted, and so that's kind of the process of replacing a full tie rod assembly on a Mini Cooper, or at least this R50 model. If you want to see more videos from me, you can certainly do that with the whole load of them that are already on the channel, including more videos on fixing this Mini, or plenty of standard things like car reviews and a load of other stuff as well. You can also hit the subscribe button if you're interested in being notified of new videos from me, and if you want to check out some of the parts, tools, or anything else, I'll leave some links in the description for you to check out. Otherwise, that is kind of it. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to let me know in the comments down below, and obviously with a like as well. If not, feel free to let me know what you think I can improve, and yeah, hope you have a good day, week, whenever you're watching this, and I'll see y'all in the next video.